The Bible explains a very mysterious antediluvian pre-flood world from Genesis 1 to around Genesis 7. A type of Atlantis where people lived for centuries, some over 900 years. Where no rain fell, a different type of climate. Only a mist rose from the earth to water the plants. Where the sons of God married women of earth and birthed the Nephilim. Huge giants who walked the earth among men. And then the world became so evil that God had to wash it all away with a great flood. Leaving only Noah the righteous and his family to survive and start all over. This sounds like fantasy, and yet this ties the whole human race today as we know it together with one common heritage. Because all of us, all cultures, all colors across the globe, because all of us who walk the earth today come from ancient civilizations who all spoke about a great flood after people became evil. A great judgment and also giants. And then one family had to start again. Today, so many humans, we often argue about what we believe the truth of life is, but so few of us actually go back into history to really study and see what our great ancestors really believed. They lived in that time, so I would think they knew what happened and where we all come from. Meaning they knew a lot of things, like who made them, who made the earth, who is God, is there one, are there many? But let's take a look at the flood today. First, the oldest written flood traditions come from ancient Mesopotamia, today known as Iraq. From the Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonian civilizations that came later. In the Sumerian flood tablet, called the Eridu Genesis by scholars, the survivor is named Zuesudra, a man who was actually warned by the gods to build a massive boat before a world-destroying deluge, meaning flood. In the Akkadian Athrasis account, a righteous man called Athrasis is instructed to preserve life in a great vessel. And we read how humanity is wiped out by a flood. And then in the later Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood survivor Utnapishtim, he brings animals aboard, releases birds to test for dry land, and offers sacrifice after the waters recede. These stories all come from the exact same place the Bible mentions that the flood happened, where the civilizations lived before the flood and right after the flood. You would also read about the Israel nation talking about their fathers who lived beyond the Euphrates. You see, ancient Mesopotamia is between Euphrates and also the Tigris River, two rivers that came from Eden. Now you might wonder, why is the name of the person not the same? Because we know him as Noah. Well, remember, people spoke the same language back then, before the flood, after the flood, and then at the Tower of Babel, what happened? They got new languages. And at that time, they called people according to meanings. Their names had meanings. So if you have different languages, those meanings would change the names. So in Sumerian, Zuesudra just means life of long days. The Akkadian language, Yathrasis, it means exceedingly wise. Later, the Babylonians called him Utnapishtim, which means he found life. And from the Hebrew language, a Semitic language, Noah means rest, relief, or comfort. So some of these names focused on how he survived, how he was wise, how he lived very long. Remember, he lived to be 600 years, and then the flood happened, and then how long did he still live? 350 years, right? So he was 950 years old, an old man. Probably looked like Gandalf, which is probably where most of those stories come from. And in that time, what happened then with the other civilizations that continued? Their lifespans became shorter. There's much more history here of why the secret societies even began at that time and continued up until today, and why they are after the Holy Grail and how to live longer, to be immortal. But I don't have time to go into that right now. The Hebrew name Noah emphasizes rest after judgment. The Bible is amazing. If you really study it, you will see a lot of interesting things, prophecies that you didn't know if you just look at it just at face value. We see the first prophecy of Genesis 3 verse 15 of the seed of the woman versus the seed of the serpent, right? But also the first line, that generation from Adam to Noah, with just using the meanings of their names, we also see a prophecy of the Messiah. So the Messiah, first prophecy is in Genesis 3 verse 15, but here we see it also in their names. Adam means man or mankind. Seth means appointed or placed. Enosh means mortal man. Kenan means possession or acquired, or related to sorrow. Mahalalel, it means praise of God. Jared, shall come down. Enoch, dedicated or trained. Methuselah, his death shall bring. Lamech, powerful or despairing. And Noah means rest, comfort, or relief. So now, when you take all those meanings together, it says this: man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching, and his death shall bring the despairing rest. How amazing is that? When God reveals these special things to us so that we can see that the Bible is not just an ordinary book. And this will become clear to you as we continue to read the different flood stories. So, you already know the one of the Bible, the ones in the ancient Mesopotamia as well. Next, let's go to Canada, the people of Montagnais. They're now known as the Innu people of Eastern Canada. A tradition tells of God who is angry at the giants. He commanded a man to build a large canoe. Why? To survive a coming flood that covered the earth. An otter and a reindeer were sent out to determine if the water had subsided. Now, some versions differ a little bit here, and you will see that with many traditions, some of the stories change a little bit with the details here and there. But this story reminds me also of the book of Enoch, who was written a long time ago by some ancient Jewish writers who wrote about the fallen angels. A group of them called the Watchers came down from Mount Hermon, and they slept with the woman of earth to create the Nephilim giants, who was wicked on the earth and caused a lot of chaos. And then, of course, God judged them. I made a whole video on the book of Enoch that you need to check out, because there's certain things that's in line with scripture and some things that are not. I'll add that for you in the video description down below and also at the end of the video. Next up is Fiji. In Fiji, the serpent deity called Ndenge sends a flood after his grandsons kill his sacred bird. Just a very quick note here, you will see the symbolism of a bird, also sometimes serpent, that spread through all cultures from this time. I covered that in some of my other videos. Even in India, you'll see that with some of their gods as well, with the Garuda, the eagle god, and then also the Nagas, the serpent gods. But this kind of symbolism with stories, even the Native American Indians. So continuing the story of Fiji, the serpent god Ndenge sends a flood after his grandsons kill his sacred bird. They flee to skilled carpenters whose god provides them double canoes. And in some versions, 8 people survive while the rest are destroyed. Now, this is interesting. They believe that the one who caused the flood was a serpent deity. What do we read about the devil? It was also called the dragon of old, the ancient serpent, right? But if we go back to the most ancient sources, even the Sumerians, they believed in this god called Enki. The word Enki in Sumerian means Lord of the Earth. And his symbolism, there was water there included, but also he had symbolism with serpents. And they worshipped this god at the Tower of Babel as well, as we know today. And so you know the Tower of Babel was built in rebellion against the God Most High. The Sumerians believed An is the God Most High, and one of his sons was Enlil, the other one was Enki. Now, secret societies, even to this day, also believe that it was Satan that supposedly wanted to help humanity, the great architect who gave them knowledge. It first started with Adam and Eve in the garden, right? He just gave them knowledge of evil. But after that, you see secret arts and information. Some people call it the seven sacred sciences that was taught to humanity. And that's why they became so evil, or one of the reasons. So they still believe that it was Satan that also supposedly wanted to save people from the flood. So he was supposedly the good guy, and God the Most High is the evil God. More on this in a future video. Next one, Tanzania, East Africa. And remember, when we talk about Africa, those descendants come from Ham, one of the sons of Noah. The Rukwa people. A tradition speaks of a great flood that covered even the mountains. 2 people survived in a boat, bringing with them various kinds of seeds and animals. After the waters began to recede, the man sent out a dove to see whether the land had dried. Later, he sent out a hawk, and this was to search for dry ground. Eventually, the water subsided and life began again from the survivors. Interesting, right? I'm not going to comment too much with each one. Let's continue. Next up, Nebraska, North America. Among the Pawnee people, there's a tradition that the first beings were giants. These giants became proud and believed they could overcome or defy the creator, known as Tir-Ra-Wa. Because of their rebellion and corruption, the creator sent a great flood that drowned them. After the destruction, Tir-Ra-Wa then created a new man and a woman to begin humanity again. Are you starting to see the pattern in these stories? Many of them talk about giants as well. The Bible also says there were giants in those days and also afterward, meaning after the flood. But you see that people were evil. There was a big judgment on humanity because they were so evil in the manner of a great flood. And then some survived on a boat, and then they started humanity again. Next one, Mexico, the mysterious Aztecs. In Aztec cosmology, the world passed through successive ages called suns. During one of these ages, often identified as the sun of water, humanity became corrupt. In some recorded versions, a couple named Nata, or also known as Nota, and Nena were warned of a coming flood. They were then instructed to hollow out a large cypress tree to survive the catastrophe. The flood destroyed the rest of humanity. And afterward, when they emerged, they were told not to cook fish or make pulque, which is a type of alcoholic drink. When they disobeyed, the gods punished them. In some versions, transforming them into dogs. I'm going to try my best not to comment on most of these, but most of you who know the Bible, you will make all the connections as well. This one is just a little bit crazy, and so I just want to make a note here that it is interesting that Noah, who was a righteous man, what did he do after the flood? Of course, he built the altar to the Lord, but also, what do we read as we continue? He made wine and got drunk. And that's interesting because here with the Aztecs, they believed long ago, those who survived the flood, of course, the gods warned them not to make an alcoholic drink, and then they disobeyed. Next one, Hawaii in Central Pacific. A man named Nu'u, it's also written as Nu in older sources, but he built a large canoe or vessel with a house built upon it to survive a great flood. He, his wife, and their 3 sons with their wives were saved, while the rest of humanity died. After the waters receded, the vessel came to rest on Mauna Kea. It's a mountain. Nu'u then offered a sacrifice in thanksgiving. In some recorded versions, a divine being descended upon a rainbow and corrected Nu'u, who had mistakenly offered the sacrifice to the wrong god. Wow, this is an interesting one because we read in the Bible that Noah, after the flood, of course, he made the sacrifice to the Lord. But in the Sumerian story, we also read that Zuasudra, he also made a sacrifice to the god. But we also read that he was warned by Enki before the time. So you'd assume that his god was Enki according to this story. And you would see that, Noah and his family worshiped the God Most High. But as their descendants continued to grow and multiply on the earth, especially from Ham's line, they started to rebel against the God Most High. So they would tell other stories as if, oh, this God is not the God Most High. We need to worship probably Enki. And we see that place in Eridu where Enki was worshipped that became the Tower of Babel, it was also there before the flood. Now, you need to remember, Noah's sons, they lived before the flood as well. And from the line of Ham, he had Cush, and then he had Nimrod. Nimrod is called Enmakar in the Sumerian language, and he rebelled against the God Most High. We also read about Nimrod becoming the first world leader in that time. And so is it possible that he started to tell people because of demonic influence there about, oh no, hey, the real gods we need to worship is this god called An, and he had kids, Enki and Lil and other gods, so like Ninurta, and now we need to worship them, of course. We also see in the Akkadian and Babylonian versions, the Athrasis and Gilgamesh, they describe the gods gathering around the sacrifice like flies. So the people from Hawaii could have kept the form of this kind of story. You can imagine as well, you have two sides. The devil always lies, so he would deceive people to start to believe other things. We know the Bible says that Noah worshipped God. He built an altar to him. But is it possible that there were many other gods, aka demons there? Of course. Remember the flood, it killed all the giants and all the people, all flesh on earth. But the spirits, the fallen angels, they're spirits, right? So they're still there. How many were there? Millions. Because when the devil rebelled against God, it says a third follow him. They were cast down to the earth. The book of Enoch also calls them watchers. So they watch what's going on with humanity. We also have that word watcher in the book of Daniel. So were there probably millions of fallen angels that watched as Noah brought that sacrifice to the Lord? I believe so. Because all the rest of humanity were gone, dead. It was only Noah and his family. And they all probably watched this new beginning. Even the angels, I believe, the good angels could watch it. We know that when one person becomes a reborn Christian, heaven rejoices. And then, of course, all those demons, they're just waiting for their time to deceive their children, to rebel against God again. And that is exactly what we saw happen. I made a full video about that you can watch after this one. I'll also add that for you in the video description down below. Let's go to the next one. And this one is also interesting. The Mayans. I always found them very interesting. They are in Guatemala. They are in Central America. The Popol Vuh of the Quiché Maya. It describes multiple creations and destructions before the final successful human generation. There is a destruction of an earlier humanity before the present age. One version describes a great catastrophe involving flooding rains and destruction sent by the gods because the first people failed to honor their creators. After this destruction, a small remnant remains. In some traditions, 4 original men who later receive wives, and from them humanity is repopulated. The Popol Vuh also tells of a time when people gathered together in one place. After they multiplied and built, their language was confused, and they could no longer understand one another. And this, of course, echoing the same kind of dispersal event that happened, as we read in the Bible, of the Tower of Babel. Also, in the story, the narrative of the first true humans, meaning before the flood, the wives are given to the men while they sleep. Interesting, right? We know that's exactly what happened with Adam and Eve. Next, let's go to Central Asian Altai traditions. They are the Turkic-speaking peoples from modern southern Siberia, Central Asia. A man named Nama, or sometimes also known as Nami, is warned of a coming flood. Because his eyesight was failing, his sons helped him to build a large ark or vessel, often described as being built on a mountain. And as the waters rose, animals and birds gathered and entered the vessel. After the flood covered the land, Nama released birds to test whether dry ground had appeared. In some recorded versions, he first released a raven, then a crow, then a rook, and finally a dove. The dove returned carrying a birch twig, signaling that the waters had begun to recede. It's starting to sink in, right? That the Bible is true. And even when you read the Bible, just the Bible itself, a lot of people, skeptics, unbelievers will say, well, that sounds like a fantasy story. I don't want to believe this. But when you compare this to all the other ancient stories from our ancestors all over the world, they all have similar stories. Yet their story sounds a little bit more weird here and there. So it shows us that the Bible, it actually has more common sense and is likely to be true. And we know it is. Next, the Arawaks, also known as the Lokono people in Guyana, northern South America. The world was destroyed twice because of human wickedness, once by fire and once by water. In the flood episode, a wise chief named Marerewana, I hope I'm not butchering that, was warned in advance of the coming deluge, the flood. He built a large canoe and saved himself and his family while the waters covered the land and destroyed the rest of humanity. Next, let's go to the continent where I was born, in Africa. The Maasai people in Kenya and also northern Tanzania, East Africa. Among the Maasai, a man named Tumbainot was warned by God of a coming worldwide flood, sent because of human wrongdoing. He was instructed to build a large wooden vessel to preserve himself, his 2 wives, his 6 sons, their wives, and various animals. When the waters covered the land, they survived in this ark-like structure. After the flood subsided, Tumbainot sent out birds to test whether the earth had dried. In certain records, he released a dove and later a vulture. Eventually, the waters receded and he saw 4 rainbows in the sky, a sign marking the end of the flood and the restoration of order. Fascinating, isn't it? What about Vikings, the Norse? What do they believe? Well, the Norse in Scandinavia, they tell the story of the primeval giant Ymir. He was slain by the gods Odin, Vili, and Ve. When Ymir is killed, so much blood flows from his body that it causes a massive flood. This flood drowns nearly all the frost giants. Only one giant, Bergelmir, and his wife survive. They escape by climbing into a wooden structure, often described in later retellings as a kind of boat or hollowed tree. It's interesting how many of the details are the same, but some of it differ a little bit. Of course, the Vikings, the Norse, they came much later. Today, the Vikings are famous. Most people, modern day people, they love Vikings because of the series Vikings and other stories. But when you really look at their gods, you can trace it back all the way to the ancient Sumerians. Because of course, at the Tower of Babel, through Enmerkar, who started pantheism, it spread to all corners of the earth. Please go and watch my video series that is on my channel on a playlist where I explain to you how all world religions started. Actually, I'm still busy with this series, so expect some exciting updates and subscribe so you won't miss it. If you truly want to understand these ancient truths and how all of these things connect with archaeology, history, the Bible, proving that the Bible is true and that we can trust it, please get this series that my brother and I, we've been working on, a new novel series that we call the Lightborn Saga. The first book is out this year, and we're starting right at the beginning in the pre-flood world. But instead of me just talking about it, let me show you very quickly.
Long ago, after the rise of a deep darkness, before the great flood, the world was ancient, untamed, and filled with wonders long forgotten. Mankind spread into scattered tribes, forging cities like Nippur, Eridu, and many watchful outposts across the untamed earth. The sons of God breached the divide. the world bow to their corruption. The blood of Seth and Cain shaped the fate of generations amidst the roar of the behemoth and terror of the Leviathan, and under the oppressive shadow of the fallen Anunnaki, humanity stood on the precipice of total corruption. In a world ravaged by darkness, one man, born a slave, rises as a warrior, driven by his search for truth and meaning. But his journey is more than survival. It reflects the cry of humanity itself, and leads to an ancient prophecy. From the darkened halls of Eridu to the Temple of Light in Nippur, Uldako walks a path of survival, of bonds broken and kept, pursued by beasts, shaped by love, scorched by loss, and caught in the war behind all wars. The war between the Sons of Light and the Lords of Shadow. One brought forth from the blood of the dragon, the other born from the light. The war between them has already begun. Lightborn, Dawn of Darkness, a new novel from Ruach Entertainment. Get the first chapters free at ruachentertainment.com.
All right, a lot of work went into this book, and we are so grateful to Harvest House helping us, the publishers, to get this out there this year. This is book one of many. A lot of research and time went into this, and this is also the perfect gift for unbelievers. If you have a few friends, they will really enjoy it, especially if they like fantasy and fiction writings. Now, why this is more than a book, apart from it being able to change lives, you can see it like a type of Pilgrim's Progress book, is because we're planning to make a game from this as well. There's 3.3 to 5 billion gamers in the world, and they usually just play dark and evil games where evil forces are behind game developer studios. We want to change that. We want to bring the Bible to them in a way that is fun, accurate, that they will want to play. So this is more than just a book. And for those of you who do not know, we started a new gaming studio under the non-profit of DLM Christian Lifestyle. It is called Ruach Entertainment. You can also go and check it out on our YouTube channel. Now, enough about the book. Let's continue the video. Let's go to the Greeks from Southern Europe. In Greek mythology, Deucalion is warned of a coming flood by his father Prometheus. He builds a large wooden chest, and then he and his wife Pyrrha survive while Zeus destroys a corrupt humanity. And then after the waters recede, they begin the renewal of mankind again. Now again, you also know of these beliefs. With the Greeks, they also have the stories of demigods, right? AKA giants. Next one, let's go to the Miao people in southern China. They were also known as the Miao Utso people in older sources. The story goes like this: a great flood in which a man and his family survive in a vessel and later repopulate the earth. Later in the 19th century missionary recordings, the survivor's name was written as Noah, and the account included preserved animals and birds sent out to test whether the waters had dried. Now, I gotta say something here that's gonna be very interesting to you, because this blew my mind when I heard it the first time, or learned and researched it. And many of you would have probably heard this already if you watched the series on how all world religions started. That's on my channel. So there's evidence that people always, from ancient times, always worship this God Most High, right? Some of them believe, of course, he had sons, and that some of those sons, of course, they worshipped as well as gods in the Bible that are just explained as fallen angels, right? But even in the Chinese, they actually have always worshipped this god most high called Shangdi. This was very clearly recorded in the Shang dynasty from around 1600 to 1000 BC. Remember, there are other religions. It only came in the 600 to 500 before Christ. I'm talking about Confucianism and Taoism here, and then also some of you might question, okay, but what about Buddhism? That also started in the 5th century. It actually started in India first. This is what I talked about earlier in this video as well. When people argue about what religion is true and right, you need to go back to how it all started. Buddhism wasn't there from the beginning of the world. So it's impossible to be true. There are many other reasons why as well, and I will get to that in that series where I talk about how all world religions started. I'll talk about that in more detail because the idea in that series is to continue up until present day. Next up, the Woonambal in Western Australia, today known as the Woonambal Gambera people. It goes like this: a man named Gajara, in some versions with his family, survived a worldwide flood on a double raft. Some versions record Gajara, who sent birds from the raft to determine if the waters had receded or not. It also explains a sacrifice where the smell of it pleased the god Ngadja. So, a rainbow was placed in the sky. You know, in this series where I talked about the Bible verses to Quran, I took some time to explain how accurate the Bible is. The Semitic tradition. Remember, the Hebrew language, the Old Testament, it comes from the Semitic tradition. They had a specific way of keeping truth and writing it down. As time went on, you see even the nation of Israel, they had people who were educated to record it word for word exactly as time went on, right? Because if you have thousands of years, some of the scrolls, of course, it kind of vanished. But if one thing was wrong, they threw it away. So you see that with the Bible compared to all these other cultures, with all their beliefs, oral traditions, and all the other traditions of the flood. You see how accurate and how detailed the Bible is. And with common sense, you can see it's definitely, there are more reasons why it is true. And many of the other ones, it's a little bit strange with some of the stories that they tell. One example is just if you look at the ark itself. If you compare the ark, the size, the shape, everything about it, with others like the Epic of Gilgamesh, that was a square, like a cube-shaped ark. I actually went to the ark encounter with Nikita, my brother, and also Jason, the studio manager from Ruach Entertainment, to do some research on Lightborn. And there it shows you clearly how it could not make sense. That cube-shaped kind of ark, no lighting and ventilation for the lower decks, and the tilting and rocking and waves would make the voyage unbearable. Then when you look at the Akkadian tablet, it describes a large coracle, but the sides are too short to stop the waves from washing over it and sinking it. Then the reeds would not be strong enough to support the structure. It would be impossible. For those of you in America, please make a visit to the Ark Encounter. It is awesome. It will blow your mind. They built that ark according to the exact instructions of the Bible, and they show you exactly how everything the Bible describes is possible, even all the animals and their sizes. There's also a Vanuatu tale from an island nation in Melanesia, that's east of Australia, that shows or describes a small canoe made from a big tree, but there would be no place for all the people and animals. Another example that's just not common sense at all is also the Woonambal legend, an Aboriginal Australian group which shows a double raft that is simply not big enough. So of all these stories, we see similar things. We see, of course, in the Bible, fallen angels, gods, and other stories. We see the God Most High. We see send the flood because people were wicked. We also see giants in that time. All of these stories connect. But I want to tell you something extremely interesting because it's not being taught in churches, but it's in the Bible. Let me focus in on the fallen angels, these supposed gods that people worship even to this day. If people do not worship the God of the Bible, they worship fallen angels. We read that in Deuteronomy 32 verse 17, which is in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament, because nothing changes. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 20. So we see that people worship fallen angels as gods. Also, when they create these idols, it has no power at all. It's man-made, it's dead, right? But there's a power behind that idol. We as humans give the demonic forces in the air a foothold. And so that is why many people believe that these other religions are true, because demons are real. Now, keep up with me, because this is going to get very interesting. We see that God of the Bible, the only God there really is, he is the God of this council of fallen angels. So he has his own council where he rules from. We read in Psalm 82 verse 1, it says, God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Again, we know that these early humans, they call the fallen angels gods, right? This is a very ancient term, also the sons of God. We read it in the book of Job, we read it in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 6. The sons of God, when it was used in the Old Testament, it was always used for fallen angels. The people in other cultures at that time, the Sumerians, they also spoke that way. For example, they called the God Most High An, and An had sons, and his sons were called the Anunnaki, the sons of God. Of course, the God Most High. Abraham, before his ancestors, called the God Most High El Elyon, the God Most High. And even in the time of Abraham, his father still worshipped these other supposed gods, fallen angels. So God called Abraham out of that land of ancient Mesopotamia, of the Chaldees. This is what happened before the flood, after the flood. They started pantheistic religions to worship these fallen angels. And there again, there were millions of them on the earth. There's still millions of them today, deceiving humankind. But after the flood, God separated. He took Abraham out of it. We read also, Joshua talks about this in Joshua 24, verse 1 to 3. And Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates. That is in ancient Mesopotamia. Remember, they come from the Semitic family, or also the Semitic languages that lived alongside the Sumerians. Terah, the father of Abraham and of Nahor, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac. Then, of course, he had Jacob. He started the nation of Israel. So we see something very interesting. Why does all happen? Of course, it has to do with Jesus Christ, the Messiah, right? That's going to come from the nation of Israel that was prophesied, starting in Genesis 3, verse 15. But we see that the God Most High, El Elyon, he divided the nations. He separated the nations. And Israel, that nation of Israel, starting with Abraham, was given to Yahweh. Remember, God El Elyon, he has his council of angels. Yahweh, his portion was Israel. Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. When the Most High, that's El Elyon, gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people. This word Lord in the Hebrew is Yahweh. And remember, what does the name of Jesus mean? Which is, of course, in the New Testament, an English word, but it comes from Yeshua, which means Yahweh is salvation. Yahweh is Jesus. And he was there in the Old Testament already. We see how he appeared to the nation of Israel time and time again. And before that, walking also in the Garden of Eden. Remember, in the Old Testament, New Testament, we learned that we cannot see God the Father. He lives in unapproachable light. If you would see him, you would die. But he reveals himself through his Son, Jesus Christ, who is also God. And they are one. Let's continue. But the Lord's portion, but Yahweh's portion is his people. Jacob, his allotted heritage. He found him in a desert land and in a howling waste of the wilderness. He encircled him. He cared for him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. Why? To show us who he truly is. All nations, even in that time, even when they escaped from Egypt, it wasn't just fully 100% Jewish people. The word Jew just came later. But what I mean is from the line of Abraham, there were other nations that went with them. There were also rules. If a sojourner comes to you, they need to treat them the right way. So over time, you also see how God, through the nation of Israel, showed his power so that all will believe in him. But more than that, it was also to show the prophecy of the Messiah that was prophesied to come through the line of Israel. That prophecy starts back in Genesis 3, verse 15. So we have this nation of Israel that the Bible follows and explains because the whole Bible is about Jesus. The Old Testament is about Jesus, pointing signposts to all the prophecies over 300 about Jesus. The New Testament is about Jesus. But when you look at in the Old Testament, how we follow the nation of Israel, we see how God reveals himself time and time again. And the whole point is to protect them, and he wants them to worship him, and he will bring the Messiah through them. The other nations who did not believe in God the Most High, the fallen angels influenced them. Remember, he also divided the nations over all the earth. And when we read especially the book of Daniel, we see a glimpse into that spiritual realm. How that prince of Persia, that demon over the army of the Persian kingdom, withhold Gabriel so that Gabriel couldn't give the message to Daniel, who was praying, I believe, 3 weeks. And he was waiting to hear from God. And then Michael, the archangel, came to help Gabriel so that Gabriel can go and give the message to Daniel, which was also, by the way, a prophecy of the kingdoms that will come. So when you look at earthly kingdoms, when you look at the history, you need to always remember God's big plan, and you need to see the spiritual warfare behind it. Because scripture also says our fight, it's not against each other, flesh and blood. It's against the spiritual forces in the air. If you want to understand this better, please get the book Lightborn, as it will become clear how the prophecy of the Messiah, who is the Lightborn, the light who was prophesied to come into our world, to save us, was prophesied from the time before the great flood. And this is only book 1 of many. And you can also watch this video here where I explain the prophecy, and then watch this playlist here of everything that's got to do with the Nephilim, where I explain things in more detail. Remember to subscribe so you won't miss the next one, where I will explain to you how all world ancient cultures talk about giants as well, because we only touched on it in this one. So subscribe, and never forget, life is short, so do not waste yours. Cheers, guys.